The first blink came on this program yesterday morning when David Littleproud told you guys that he'd accepted Susan Lee rejecting his suggestion that they no longer have what's called solidarity in the shadow cabinet. In other words, Nationals who are on the front bench would be allowed to freelance, go their own way on policy positions. That was always going to be unworkable. As anyone who knows politics knows, you're meant to stick together if you're in a cabinet or a shadow cabinet. Otherwise, it doesn't exactly work. So, look, he accepted on this program yesterday, OK, fair enough, I'll take that. And after hearing that, Susan Lee then made her move. She agreed the Liberals would now consider these 4 policy demands from the Nationals. So a bit of a blink from the Liberals as well. And they're going to consider those separate to their longer policy, post-election policy review. So, you know, both sides got a bit of something. They paused their plans to announce individual frontbench teams, which would have really made things pretty hard to unscramble. And so, look, they're not back together, but they're talking, they're progressing, they're texting, they're playing nice. And the likelihood is they will reunite. Meanwhile, many in both parties are simply scratching their heads and wondering how it all came to this. How did they split at all this week over these things? You know, it's quite a thing. We rarely see the spoils of defeat being fought over quite as badly as this.
Oh, David, it has been unbelievable. So what do you think is going to happen now? Do you think the Liberals are going to agree to the Nationals' demands or what? What's going to happen?
Look, they're going to have a meeting next week here in Canberra. It's understood the Liberals look, it's unknown whether they finalise everything this week. I think there is a bit of urgency, but at the same time, they don't want to show too much urgency because, you know, they're unhappy, most of the Libs, with how the Nats have behaved here. They see this as bad faith, as, you know, forcing early decisions at the start of this term on policies that really they should be taking their time to work out where they went wrong, where they need to reposition. And these demands from the National Party are putting them in a pretty awkward position. The former Liberal Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull spoke to the Insiders podcast this week, and he says this is another example of the Nationals wagging the tail wagging the dog, and he says it's stupid, in fact, to be setting in stone policy positions right now.
I think this holding a gun to the Liberal Party's head, which is what the Nats are doing, is really, really unwise. It's stupid politically, because if Susan Lee agrees to it, then people will say, there you go again, the Liberals are doing, you know, the tail's wagging the dog, the Liberals are doing the Nationals' bidding.
And this is the difficulty for Susan Lee, right? Does she look weak if she accepts these demands? Notwithstanding all of those concerns, they are expected to accept them. The nuclear demand is no longer to have the 7 taxpayer-funded plants built around the country, as they talked about in the election, simply removing the ban on nuclear power in Australia. That's acceptable to most Liberals. So are the other measures here. The divestiture power is a bit more problematic, but might just be the price they have to pay of keeping the coalition together.
Yeah, just before we let you go, what is the future then? If the coalition gets the band back together, they have a policy fight again, what's to stop the Nationals throwing the toys out of the cot and saying we're walking away again, right? Is this a precedent? Exactly.
Yes, it's going to be a pretty tenuous relationship. It's going to be damaged by the events of this week. And look, they had a shocking election result. This week's been a shocking week in terms of blowing up the coalition and now trying to stitch it back together. But in many ways, these 4 policy areas aren't going to be as difficult as the ones to come. What are they going to do on net zero and sticking with the net zero emissions target? You've got the Nationals, plenty of them, who want to dump it all together. And you've got Liberals, some of them are divided amongst themselves. What about a 2035 emissions target that the Prime Minister will announce in the coming months? Where do they land on that? The environment law changes that the government's going to bowl up to Parliament to speed up approvals and protect the environment a bit more. They're divided on that. There are going to be divisions, splits. Are they going to be able to hold together? They need to be a credible opposition and for that reason stick together. But the policy challenges, the differences, the divisions, they're only going to continue.
Yeah, interesting times, David. Thank you very much for that.
Thanks,
and
guys.
A reminder, of course, that you can join David and his Insiders team this Sunday morning on ABC TV and iView. His special guest will be the Nationals Senate leader, Bridget McKenzie, who's had a bit to say this week.